It started with a single sentence over dinner. My mom set down her wine glass, looked at my dad and said, "We need to talk about the numbers." I was sitting right there, their only child, the one who had just joined the family company 2 months ago, the company that had been their pride and joy for 20 years. I spent my entire childhood hearing phrases like, "Someday this will all be yours." But that night something in the air was off. My dad's jaw tightened, his eyes cold. "Not at the table, Linda," he muttered. She ignored him. "You promised me transparency. You said no more lies." I tried to focus on my plate, pretending not to hear. But when you grow up in a family like mine, where money is love and silence is currency, you learn to listen between the words. Then Dad slammed his hand on the table so hard that my fork jumped. "I told you I handled it," he barked. Handled what I asked before I could stop myself. They both froze. Mom's eyes darted toward me, then back at him. "He deserves to know," she whispered. Dad's face turned crimson. "No, he doesn't, he." That was the first time I realized something was deeply wrong. Not just a business issue, something personal. Something that made my mother look scared and my father defensive. The next morning, she slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand before I left for work. "Don't tell your father," she said softly. "But if you want to understand what is happening, start here." It was an email printout. Subject line: Retransfer Agreement Confidential. That is how the unraveling began. I didn't open the email at first. It sat in my pocket all day, burning like a secret I wasn't supposed to touch. My mom never went against my dad, not openly at least. So if she'd given me something behind his back, it had to be serious. That night, when everyone was asleep, I unfolded the print out under the dim light of my desk lamp. The email was short, just a few lines, but enough to change everything I thought I knew about our business. Confirming the transfer of 27% of company shares to LW under the private trust agreement. All documentation has been filed as requested. The son has not been informed. The son. That was me, LW. Linda Williams. My mom. I read it over and over again, trying to make sense of it. My dad always said he owned 100% of the company. He was the self-made man who built it from nothing. But this email said otherwise, that Mom secretly owned nearly a third of it, and that I wasn't supposed to know. The next morning I asked her about it. She looked pale, exhausted. "Your father, didn't he build the company alone?" she said quietly. "I invested everything I had when we started. But when he registered it, he put only his name on the documents. Said it would simplify things." "Then why the secrecy?" I pressed. She hesitated, then whispered, "Because he made me sign something I didn't. He understand. A trust, and I think he is planning to take even that away from me." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce. "Don't trust him, Jake. Whatever happens next, remember that." That was the moment I realized my parents weren't partners anymore. They were opponents, and I was standing right in the middle of their battlefield. The next week at work felt wrong. My dad, normally confident and charming, had turned into a storm barely contained behind a fake smile. He'd call me into meetings just to criticize the smallest things, the tone of an email, the color of a presentation slide. It wasn't team mentoring anymore. It was control. I noticed how people looked at me when I walked by, whispering, glancing, stopping mid-sentence. My last name used to mean respect around here. Now it was like poison. Then I overheard him in his office one afternoon. He didn't know I was standing just outside the door. "She's losing it," he said sharply into the phone. "If she tries to pull anything legal, I'll dissolve the trust before she even realizes what happened." A pause then, and if Jake asks questions, I'll handle him too. Those words hit harder than any slap handle me. That night I confronted my mom. She didn't seem surprised. "He is preparing to sell part of the company to his partner," she said. "Once that happens, my shares and yours will mean nothing." "Mine," I frowned. She gave a small, bitter laugh. "He told you you'd inherit the business, didn't he? You already own 5%, Jake. But he is planning to transfer it under a new name, so you will have no claim left." It felt like the floor fell out from under me. My own father was cutting me out, not because I failed him, but because I might someday challenge him. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the city lights through my window, wondering how long I'd been living inside his life. And for the first time in my life, I thought about fighting back. The next morning, I went to work early, earlier than anyone else. The building was quiet, the hum of the only sound as I slipped into my father's office, using the spare key ID borrowed years ago. His computer was locked, of course, but I wasn't here for that. I went straight to the filing cabinet, the old one he still kept for security reasons. Inside were contracts, ledgers, and receipts dating back years. I flipped through them quickly. Most looked normal, but then I found a folder labeled consulting fees. J. Harper. That name meant nothing to me. I opened it and froze. There were monthly payments, huge ones being transferred to an account under my mother's maiden name. But the signatures were my father's. At first I thought maybe it was hush money. But then hidden in the back, I found another document, a purchase order for industrial equipment. Only the supplier didn't exist. Fake invoices, fake payments, money disappearing into accounts linked to consultants that didn't exist. My father wasn't just manipulative. He was laundering money. I took photos of everything. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. If he found out I was done. When I got home, I showed the pictures to my mom. She went silent, her face pale. I knew he was hiding something. She whispered, "But this could destroy him." "Then we go to the board," I said. She shook her head no. "If this comes out, he'll drag us both down with him. He is not the kind of man who loses quietly." I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet, but that night. My father showed up at my apartment, unannounced. He smiled too calmly. "We need to talk, son." And in that moment, I knew he already suspected everything. He walked into my apartment like he owned the place. Still wearing his tailored suit. Still smelling like expensive cologne and power. My father had always known how to command a room. Even this one-bedroom apartment, I barely afforded nice place. He said, scanning the room with that thin smile. "Modest teaches humility." I didn't respond. He sat down on my couch like a king taking his throne. "I've noticed you've been distracted lately. Snooping around the office, asking questions that aren't yours to ask." My stomach tightened. "I work there, they are my questions." He chuckled low and cold. "You think because you share my blood, you're entitled to something. You're not ready to run that company, Jake. You've never been ready." Something in me snapped. "Then why bring me in at all? just to watch me fail. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because it's better to keep your enemies close. I froze. He smiled, wider eyes burning. You think your mother has been honest with you? She has been trying to take what is mine for years, and now she is using you to do it. She destroy you, son. Like she tried to destroy me. For a moment I almost believed him. He was persuasive, that says how he built an empire. But then I remembered the email, the fake invoices, the lies. He stood, straightened his jacket. Here is my advice, he said softly. Stay out of this, or I'll make sure you regret it. Then he left. No shouting, no threats. Just that cold certainty, the kind that meant he would do it. I locked the door and sat in silence for hours. Every word he said replayed in my head. Enemies. Betrayal. Regret. He wasn't just protecting his business. He was preparing for war. By Monday the office had changed. People who used to greet me avoided eye contact. A few whispered when I passed. Even my assistant, who'd always been kind, suddenly started calling me Mr. Williams, like she was keeping her distance. I didn't have to wonder long why. That afternoon, my dad called a company-wide meeting. He stood at the front, voice smooth, confident. The perfect CEO. I have to address some misunderstandings. He began. There have been rumors about missing funds and internal conflicts. I want to be clear, everything is under control. He looked directly at me when he said that. Then he added, unfortunately, one of our junior managers mishandled confidential documents, causing unnecessary confusion. The employee has been reprimanded. The room turned toward me. Dozens of eyes, whispers. My heart pounded in my chest. He just branded me a liability in front of everyone. Afterward, my inbox exploded with urgent tasks I'd never heard of. Colleagues stopped replying to my messages. Projects I'd worked on were reassigned overnight. By Wednesday, HR called me in for a quick chat. They handed me a warning letter for unauthorized access to restricted files. He was burying me from the inside. I went to my mom that evening, furious. But before I could speak, she snapped. What did you do, Jake? I froze. What do you mean? She sighed, rubbing her temples. Your father called me. Said you broke company policy. That you've been unstable lately. Mom, he is lying. Her eyes softened, but doubt flickered there. The kind that hurts more than anger. He did it. He did driven a wedge between us. That night, I realized he wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was destroying anyone who could expose him, starting with me. I was done playing defense. If my father wanted war, he was going to get one. The only problem, I had no power. No authority, and no one believed me. Everyone in that company owed him something. Their salary, their position, their fear. Except one person. My upper our head accountant. She'd been with the company for 12 years and didn't care about office politics. She'd seen it all, including my father's creative accounting. I found her after hours, still in her office surrounded by spreadsheets. Don't tell me, she said, without looking up. You finally realized your dad is cooking the books. I blinked. You knew. She gave a small smirk. I've known for a long time. But speaking up would cost me everything. Then help me expose him, I said. I'll protect you, she laughed softly. Jake, you can't even protect yourself. But she paused. I do have backups. Files your father doesn't he know exist. That was the first real hope ID had in weeks. We spent hours that night going through financial records, tracing payments to ghost accounts, matching them to fake suppliers. Every new file was another nail in his coffin. When I left the office past midnight, my hands were trembling not from fear but adrenaline. For the first time I had proof. But the next morning my auntie didn't show up to work. Her desk was empty. Her email account deleted. When I asked around, HR told me she'd resigned. Suddenly, no notice, no goodbyes, and then sitting on my chair, I found a single envelope with my name on it. Inside was a USB drive and a note in her hand. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Be careful who you trust. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and froze. Inside were hundreds of documents, emails, and financial records, all pointing directly to my father's illegal activities. Ghost accounts, fake invoices, secret transfers. Every word, every number screamed proof. But there was a catch. The last folder was labeled Jake Warning. I opened it, my stomach dropped. A single video file. I hesitated, then clicked play. It was my father sitting in his office, calm as ever, looking straight into the camera. Jake, he said softly, if you think you can use these files against me, think again. I built this empire with my blood, and I will not let it fall. You've made one critical mistake, trusting someone else. He paused, then smiled. I know what you're doing. I know about and I know how to make sure you regret ever questioning me. The video ended. My hands were shaking. That night, someone banged on my apartment door. I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. Just a black envelope on the welcome mat. Inside, another note in my father's handwriting. Stop now, or there will be consequences. Not just your career. It was the first time I truly feared him. Not just as a manipulative father or ruthless CEO, but as a man who could destroy everything I cared about, and possibly more. I couldn't he go to the police. My mother warned me about that. He had Allah's lawyers, connections that could bury me before a single case even started. But I also couldn't he walk away. Not now, not after everything I'd uncovered. Somewhere deep down I realized this war wasn't he just about a company anymore. It was personal. And the first rule of surviving it, never let him see fear. I spent the next week planning every move, like a general preparing for battle. Every document, every email, every record from my USB was carefully cataloged. I needed allies, not many, but ones I could trust. I reached out to a former board member who had quietly opposed my father's reckless deals for years. She was hesitant at first, but once I showed her a few key files, she agreed to help. Together, we devised a strategy. Leak the information strategically, in a way that would protect me and my mother, but force my father into a corner. The night before the board meeting, I stayed up reviewing everything again. My heart raced. One wrong move and my father could destroy me. But staying passive meant losing everything. The morning of the meeting, I walked into the boardroom with confidence. I didn't feel the directors were already seated. My father at the head, smug as ever. He glanced at me and smirked. I hope you're ready, son, he said, eyes cold. I placed a folder on the table and everyone leaned in. Inside were copies of invoices, bank transfers, and emails, enough to show a clear pattern of fraud. The room went silent. My father's face shifted from disbelief to anger, then to a cold, calculated calm. "You think this proves anything?" he sneered. "I built this company. I control it. You're just a boy trying to play CEO." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but now the board can see the truth. And the auditors are on their way. You want to have control for long." The tension was unbearable. Every second stretched, every breath felt heavy. For the first time I saw fear, real fear in my father's eyes. Not the polite, controlled kind. He showed the world actual fear. And in that moment, I realized the war was finally turning in my favor. The boardroom was quiet, the air thick with tension. My father sat at the head of the table, his face pale, lips pressed tight. The documents were in everyone's hands now, undeniable proof of embezzlement, fraud, and secret transfers. He opened his mouth to speak, but the chairwoman, calm and authoritative, interrupted. "Mr. Williams, your actions have left the company vulnerable and your family in turmoil. You will step down immediately. The auditors will oversee every transaction going forward." My father's jaw clenched. He looked at me, anger, disbelief, and something I hadn't seen before: defeat. He had always been untouchable until now. After the meeting, my mother and I stayed behind. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "You did the right thing, Jake. Not just for me, but for all of us." I looked at her, thinking about everything that had happened, the lies, the manipulation, the constant tension. I had almost lost myself in revenge, almost let anger define me. But now, watching my father leave the building, escorted by auditors and board members, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. We weren't celebrating his downfall. We were reclaiming our lives. "Are you going to call him?" my mother asked quietly. I shook my head, no. Some battles don't need a last word. Some people get the consequences without hearing it. For the first time in years, the house felt like home. The company wasn't mine yet, but my mother and I had a clean path to rebuild, honestly, fairly together. I knew one thing for certain: loyalty. Honesty and courage had been my weapons. And sometimes doing the right thing meant standing up to the people you love the most. As we walked out of the office side by side, I realized that the war had ended not with hatred, but with justice. And for once, I didn't feel guilty for it.